everybody. How we doing? Hope you're all safe out there. My name is Dan. I'm the Jazz Shepherd, as I'm sure most of you know. Today we're going to talk about a label kind of near and dear to my heart, Argo. Argo is out of Chicago. Chicago is grit. Chicago is the blues. Chicago has dirty, dark soul. Chicago has jazz. And Chicago, in the history and lineage of jazz, is a very important city, and it's kind of a stepping stone to New York. The train paths and migration from the south pretty much comes up the Mississippi, up the train tracks to Chicago, to be dispersed east. And that's kind of the shape of jazz geographically, is New Orleans, the playing in the south of the blues, moving up through Memphis, St. Louis, Kansas City, into Chicago, and then going to Chicago east, looking for work, both in the industrial fields and then for musicians in the clubs and the studios out on the East Coast. Most guys who go east first cut their teeth in Chicago and make it there. Going back to Armstrong, it was an incredibly important town. It was a very much gritty blue-collar city. Immigrants from Eastern Europe, immigrants from just about everywhere in the world. It wasn't as polished and as upper class as New York was. Chicago had a lot of poor. And it actually led to a lot of people from different cultures making some pretty good jazz. But of course, there's nothing touches the black musicians who made this music. It's their music, it's their language, they can speak it better than anybody. And it's not just about virtuosity. You can be an incredible player as a white guy, and still where you emote from what you say is going to be different, as I've said 1,000 times. And when you start to feel jazz and not just hear jazz, hearing is something. You can go, it's a great player, and hearing it. But when you feel something, when the guy's playing and something clicks inside and you connect with it and you go, oh my God, I feel a little anger, a little sorrow, a little sadness, a little fear, a little pang of something. That's the artist communicating with you. And that's where the power lies. The power is not in virtuosity. Virtuosity is always a byproduct of me staying so much time within this shelter, being safe, being healed, being whole, being healthy. I need to be here to contain myself. And by being here so frequently, virtuosity becomes that natural repercussion. Chicago was, like I said, home to a lot of blues players. The great Chess label formed by the Leonard and Albert Chess brothers, Leonard and I can't think of the other guy's name right now. They formed Chess Records. Then they started Argo as a jazz counterprint for their jazz stuff. And there's a lot of obscure titles early on that are all really good, actually. We're going to always in these series focus on the early works of these labels, just to give people an idea where different labels were in the late 50s, early 60s. It gives you more of a comparison. If I did a bunch of late stuff from a label, it wouldn't really kind of compare to what I've done on the other labels. So, Argo. First and foremost, there's two series. There's a 4000 series and there's a 600 series. The 600 series runs up to about 750, and then due to a lawsuit, Argo has to change its name to Cadet. So Cadet is just a continuation of the Argo serial numbers. And some of the issues in 7, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 will have issues on both, with the Argo one usually being the older one. But I want to show you one record from the 4000 series. I know I have less of that stuff. She's a big part of the 4000 series, Etta James. We all know her from At Last. Every wedding on the continent has played that probably the last 60 years. It's a beautiful song, and she's a great blues singer. She has a lot of the early southern black gospel blues in her, and you feel like it's just natural to her. She's not thinking about singing. She's not thinking about her voice. It's just a comfortable, down home. She could probably whip these songs out at a picnic, potato salad on the side of her mouth with a tambourine, and still move you. And that's the power of the blues and the gospel and the black church music, is that it's comfortable. It's at home. It's not trying too hard to impress or be something. And it's that point is when art often does impress us. Like, wow, they're making that look easy. Just like some of the great basketball players, when they do some really difficult stuff, it's instinctual, it's comfortable, it's natural to them, and stuff we could never dream of doing. Etta James is great. He has a lot of records in the 4000 series. There are none in the 600. They're all in the 4000 series. I'd like to say the 4000 series is a little bit poppier, but it's not that clearly defined. And later in the 4000 series, there's a Blakey record of an earlier session, Tough. It's not clearly defined. But the 600 series is the one we're going to focus on the most. And right off the bat, they're doing some pretty gutsy stuff. I have most of the 600 series, and most of the 700 series. I probably have 185 of the 200. A lot of what I'm missing is compilations, sampler kind of records. There's a record by a Pinky Winters, 604. I've never been able to come across, never been able to even bid on it, never even been able to look at one. It's really rare, and a lot of the early Argo 600 through 650 stuff is really rare, and it's also hardly ever been reissued, most of it, and that is partly what drives some of the prices up on some of these records. This is the Chicago scene. Sandy Mossy, Irish Woman, Eddie Baker. Great cover. Shows the Blue Note Cafe Club, the preview. I don't think who else is on this. But it's swinging, it's modern. Bump it ahead a little bit. So there's some group movements, some great soloing, great writing and arranging, great recordings. They sound great, they look great. A lot of love, I feel like, goes into Argo Records. Sadly, Phil and Leonard Chess, there you go. Those brothers weren't necessarily renowned for treating their black musicians very well, which I would like to say is not a common thing, but the more I've dug into this music, the more I've found out kind of just how common that is. The labels that treated their black musicians well were the exceptions, not the norm. By any means, not the norm. This is Clark Terry, a guy who plays with Ellington in the 40s and 50s. A fiery trumpet player, really bright tone, a fairly expressive player. I feel like every time I see a picture of the guy, he's smiling like that. What's that tell you about him? What's that tell you about his personality? He's a pretty joyous, pretty easygoing, pretty forgiving, lighthearted person, and that impacts what he's telling you through his horn. I'm like, I wish people, it's so simple. That is a statement about where this guy's coming from and how he's handling his experience in his environment. Personality helps us plot our course through our life. And Clark Terry is, like I said, a positive, bright player. He records for years, some on Riverside, some on Impulse. Here he's doing the great song Caravan. This is a very hard record to come by. You're lucky to find this for under $100. I've seen it up to like $200-300. And Argos won't go much over that. They don't have quite the name recognition of some of the New York labels, which it deserves to be on par with them in a lot of ways. But again, Clark Terry, solid stuff, great player, as you can hear. The MJT +3. You guys have a number of records on Argo early on. This is the first in the Daddy-O Presents series, which there's 4 of. He helped produce and publicize these records. He was a local popular radio personality, and he helped really push modern jazz past the swing era in the Chicago airways. A really hip cat. A lot of people kind of copied him, and the whole Daddy-O thing is all derived from him. Even a film came out kind of saying that same thing. But Bob Cranshaw, Paul Serrano, a great fiery trumpet player, Nicky Hill, kind of an under-recognized sax player from Chicago, and of course Walter Perkins on the drums, who his name will show up a lot, not just on Chess, but on a lot of labels throughout the 60s. You'll see Walter Perkins on the drums. Richard Abrams on the piano, another guy that's a little underappreciated. Again, cool art. It's a little bit more connected to the times, you know, but it's still a far cry from what the crap Sad Boy was putting out as album art. One of the first real names that most people here are going to be real familiar with, even kind of beginners, will be Max Roach. Max Roach is pretty much incapable of playing anything but fire. It's one of those weird records where the label is printed backwards. And I remember one of the things about this record was it was always really expensive when I found it. And I'm like, why is that Argo record so expensive? And part 1 is Kenny Dorham's on this record. Part 2 is Hank Mobley's on this record. And you put Dorham and especially Hank Mobley on a record, it's always going to double what you pay for it, because the Mobley guys know and are looking for it. Mobley guys are completists, and they want stuff with Mobley on it. And Mobley's just one of those great players that he's second tier in terms of publicity wise, but he's absolutely first tier in terms of emoting and being a great evangelist for this music. Max is one of the great drummers of all time. Just absolutely can play blistering tempos. If you haven't seen my 5 minutes with Maximum episode, check it out. It's just me listening to a Max track, and the fire and the ferocity, it just makes me inspired. And I have a 5-minute diatribe speaking on it. Those 5-minute episodes are fun. I need to do another one coming up soon. But Max, you gotta love Max Roach. Another one of those records in the Daddy-O series. I think for me this was probably the toughest one to find. Although I think I found this before the Clark Terry, but I looked for this longer than I looked for the Clark Terry. And this is the great Paul Gonsalves. And Paul Gonsalves is a great tenor player. Beautiful, crisp enunciation, a nice tone. Comes from the Ellington School, and there's 2 players in jazz: people who played with Ellington and people who were influenced by Ellington. You know, in a way, we're all from the Ellington School. These guys just actually happen to learn under the great. Gonsalves is renowned for helping rejuvenate Ellington's career at Newport in 55, 54, 56, and there's somewhere. There's the Great Newport Jazz Festival, which happened every year in Newport, Rhode Island. They brought a lot of the great jazz players out from New York, and even some of the West Coast guys would show up, and Chicago guys. And they're doing diminuendo and crescendo and blue. And when Paul plays, he kind of stands up, and the crowd starts getting into it, and the band starts egging him on, and Ellington starts egging him on. Next thing you know, they're playing 20-some choruses of that song, and it goes on and on forever. And it really sold well, that record, and rejuvenated Ellington's career, both in a live setting and as a record sales artist. So he's important for that aspect alone, Gonsalves. He has a few records on Impulse, a few other records here and there on smaller independent labels. But this is a record, if you ever see it, buy it. If it's under $100, buy it right away. It can go for $300, $400. It's probably the most expensive Argo record that I see on a consistent basis. That's never cheap. Also in the Daddy-O series. Now we're again in the Daddy-O series. the great Ramsey Lewis. And he'll become famous 5-6 years from now with a pretty big hit, whose name is also escaping me right now. I can see the cover of it, but it's also on Argo Cadet, but no, I can't think of it. But he is one of the staples of the Argo label, along with Ahmad Jamal. These guys make a lot of records, and mostly in a trio setting. Once in a while they'll add a vibraphone player or a horn player, but for the most part it's the trio. LD Young and Holt play the drums and the bass, and he plays beautifully. The whole group, they're very in tune with each other. How gorgeous is that? One of the harder ones to find for Ramsey Lewis is this one, because the Daddy-O presents, and it's fairly early, and we're still at 627. So everything I've shown you so far has been that first 27 Argos, and it's, people sleep on Ramsey, man. People sleep on Ramsey Lewis. He's just a great piano player, and sometimes I guess it's a little chamber music at times, but I think in some ways that's kind of what they're going for. But it's sophisticated and it always swings. There it is. And what did Ella say? If it ain't got that swing, this got it. So when you see a Ramsey Lewis record in a thrift store, and he's got a lot of Argo records, so you see a Ramsey Lewis record at a thrift store for $4, buy that. Buy that. A fiery guy with the name Vito. Hey Vito, how you doing? Vitos are always gonna have a little fire to them. Great picture of the Chicago Loop in the background. You got Lou Levy, Max Bennett, Freddie Green, and Gus Johnson. A great quintet here. Great tempos, great modern sounding playing. It just kind of captures the feel and the energy of the city, the hustle and the bustle. And it's a great shot of them, probably right on Michigan Avenue if I had to guess. It could be State Street, but I think that's Michigan Avenue, but it's hard to say. There's some Coleman Hawkins in that. Beautiful. See what I'm saying? Just because you don't know a guy, if it's on a label of repute, it's gonna be good. These labels don't put out bad records. We are not gonna waste a second of tape recording someone who can't really play. And that's important to understand, because when you are buying old jazz records and you aren't sure, a label's reputation alone can be enough. I mentioned this guy a second ago, and he's the other, to me, staple, bedrock of the Argo label, and they both sold well. Ramsey and Jamal, both great piano players, both put a lot of records on the label, and I think they were the two guys that kind of kept the label in business and in the black. And the label never gets too experimental. You know, they do some interesting stuff, no question about it, but we're well here before the avant-garde at this point. We're still at number 646, and so we're still in the late 50s. Great picture of Chicago down by the Hancock Tower would shoot up in there nowadays. I can't remember if that's called the Palm Olive Building, but I know the building exactly where it's at, on the north end of Michigan Avenue there on the lake. Another great, this should have been with Ramsey Lewis. Another picture of the Chicago skyline, that's right there on the Michigan River, on the Chicago River. But Ahmad's a great player. I think Ahmad Jamal is a little bit more spiritual and contemplative in his playing than Ramsey. Ramsey's a little bit more of a swing, R&B, hints of Ray Charles, hints of soul, and hints of the gospel. Ahmad's got the blues and the sorrow and the intense, dynamic prayer to his playing that I really, really enjoy. We're going to move along to number 655 now. And Argo is able to attract talent. And remember, this is affiliated with Chess Records. So Chess Records is a pretty huge name. This is consistently one of the most expensive records on Argo. It's sold pretty well, but it's with the great Kenny Burrell, live with the Vanguard in a trio setting. I have a Japanese pressing because the American ones were either beat to shit for 50 bucks or they were in great shape for 200 bucks, 180 bucks, 150 bucks. You can actually get this probably in good shape for 100 bucks, but I didn't want to pay that for it. I bought a Japanese copy for 30. And if you buy it from Japan, never buy one record, because that $30 record with that $20 shipping, it's just double the cost of your record. If you buy 6 records from Japan, your shipping only goes up incrementally a little bit. Suddenly you're only paying $5 for shipping per record. It makes it a much better value. Keep that in mind. 4 or 5 Japanese records at a time is always recommended. Minimum 3. But I love Burrell. Burrell's at Blue Note, Burrell's at Prestige, Burrell's at Verve, Burrell's almost everywhere. I probably have 60 records by the guy, and he shows up as a sideman probably in hundreds of records I own. Truly, him and Paul Chambers are the guys. When I went through highlighting their discographies, what I had, it was just like, oh, he's on that. Oh shit, I forgot he's on that. Oh man, he's just prolific in where he's at. Really beautiful player. A lot of contemplating in his playing. This is a guy that's a hard record to find. Richard Evans Trio. They Bill Cosby'd him a little bit here, just in terms of Huxtable and look at the way he dresses and looks here. I think again, his personality's coming through in that photo, though. All the same, he might not be a kindergarten teacher, but he's probably a pretty fun guy to be around. And he's a bass player. And after I got to know about him, I keep finding his name. He plays on a lot of records. At Argo, especially, but he shows up around in the 50s and 60s on a lot of different labels. He was a great arranger, always had swing at the foreground of what he did. I love this record, and I love things that he's on and arranging. He's kind of an unknown guy in a lot of ways, Richard Evans, but he's absolutely a very important player in the history of Chicago jazz and the history of modern jazz in general. Dig Richard Evans. Argo signs over from King Records, Lorez Alexandria. I'm going to show you a couple of her records here. Lorez Alexandria is a great bluesy singer. There's some gospel in her, elements of real sorrow. But there's also kind of we're going to get through this. And that's why the blues is important. That's why jazz is important. Even today with what's going on in the world, we're going to get through this. We will. Positive. We survived much worse. World War II destroyed the homes of millions of people. There's no reason not to be safe and not be smart, but put on some blues. Put on some blues and let it soak in for a second the struggle that people went through for centuries. And I can't feel sorry for myself feeling some anxiety for a few weeks. What all I have to do is be smart. And I'll go back to being a first-class citizen. These people didn't have that simple of a process out of the dark. See what I'm saying? It wasn't that simple. for them just to change who they were. You can put on the nicest suit in the world, still go out and you're still a black man. You know what I mean? The average criminal can hide his identity with looks and hair and clothes. A black guy is going to be pretty identifiable no matter where he's at.
Ain't got no telephone number.
She ain't got it. I'm also trying to lose some weight, guys. I'm already feeling better. But I'm down probably 8 pounds. This epidemic's giving me a reason to kind of even eat healthier and be more health conscious. Now, one of my favorite sequencer records on Argo, and one of the best groups on Argo, is the fantastic Jazz Tet. And composed of Art Farmer and Benny Golson out front. And now we're at Argo 664. So we're probably 59, maybe 60 by now. And Art Farmer and Benny Golson are both big names in modern jazz. Hard Bop. And then if you look who else is in the group, Addison Farmer, Curtis Fuller on the trombone, who you're hearing right there, Lex Humphreys, and then a young McCoy Tyner, who just passed. So you're talking about a pretty serious group of young black musicians given the chance to record at Argo and make some powerful records. And I'm going to show you all 4 of the records they made. So I think these are some of the best examples of real modern, hard driving, hard bop. It is. It's got the tempos, it's got the vibe. Another one, the big city sound. Art Farmer and Benny Golson. And I think that the group stays pretty much the same through most of these albums. The Jazz Tet at the Birdhouse. What a great album cover that is. Absolutely beautiful. The Jazz Tet with the addition of John Lewis now, of modern jazz quartet fame. So you're seeing that this is on par with what Blue Note and with Prestige is doing. What I haven't shown you here in these first 70 releases is the literally dozens of records you've never heard of, never seen. A lot of it's even by black guys, some of it's by white cats, but there's a lot of really, really rare, obscure Argo records. I've found most of them, and one of the things I want to do is at some point here is do an episode and show you a dozen records by label you've never seen. And I'm just trying to find the right way to do it, because in my experience, the more my audience knows the subject, the more people watch it. If I make an episode about Miles Davis, everybody watches it. If I make an episode about Blue Note, everybody watches it. If I make a record about obscure Bethlehem singers or 10 inches, a third of the people watch it. And so I'm trying to find a way to balance that. How do I get people to watch the stuff they don't know about? And obviously some of you guys out there want to learn and know the stuff that they don't know. But I guess it's just human nature. Oh, I know what Miles Davis, I'm going to watch this one. But there's a lot to learn in jazz beyond Miles Davis. There's a lot to listen to in jazz beyond Blue Note. And while both are great, both have incredible marketing departments now in the present, pushing and promoting that product. And for me, Blue Note deservedly so. In the case of Miles, less so for my taste. Not to say I don't love a lot of Miles Davis stuff, but like I've said many times, his place in the jazz kingdom is inflated by his popularity and by the label that's promoting him. The last record I'm going to show you today is a record by Art Farmer as a solo player. And I gotta look who's on this record. Tommy Flanagan, forgot about that. Art Farmer, Tommy Williams on bass, and Albert Heath on the drums. So it's a quartet. And To me, Chet Baker, Art Farmer, Miles Davis are kind of lumped together as the soft-toned, ballad-playing, mid-tempo players. They're not quite with the Morgans and the Clifford Browns and the Freddie Hubbards in terms of that fire, ferocity, and that tempo. They're more the mid-tempo guys and who play with soft, cream. They take the brightness off the trumpet. And trumpet can be a very bright instrument. Trumpet can be almost piercing, especially in a digital format. These three players, Miles, Art, and Chet Baker, and there's other guys, of course, that also are in that mold. But these are the three guys that if you play this way, you're going to be compared to. People probably hearing this would think, oh, is this Miles? But it's Art. And Art Farmer on Argo, this is a great record. It'll probably cost you 50 to 70 bucks, 30 if you're lucky. This is a beautiful condition one I found in the wild a couple years back. Probably paid 30 bucks for it at the time, before the whole world went fucking crazy for records. The price on records today is insane. What can you do? The world's fucking nuts, man. But so that's the legacy of Argo. And again, we even at this record, we're still only what, 680, 678. So we haven't even really delved into the next 150 Argo records that come out, where there's a lot of more name players. I missed the Sonny Stiff stuff that came out earlier because I can only do so many. And hopefully this channel goes on for years and we'll cover Sonny Stiff at Argo. I also want to do an episode on Sonny Stiff eventually here. I've been saying that on a couple episodes already. Sonny Stiff's one of the great underappreciated players in jazz, I think. He's a fiery player. Argo is wonderful. And I love Argo because I feel like in some ways I'm in a little secret. I got all these rare Argo records that are really good that most people, except for you, Scott Ball, and Willis Reed, who's that? There's another guy on the Facebook group who they know they're Argos. But a lot of people just don't really know Argo, kind of sleep on Argo, pass over Argo, and do not pass up Argo. They will cost you a fraction of what the New York labels will cost you. They will be as enjoyable. It really captures the vibe of the city. You can almost smell Chicago. You can almost feel onions and hot dog dripping down your shirt at times. It's just a great city. It's got a lot of heart, a lot of muscle, and I think the music reflects a lot of that. And it seemed like the city was broad enough, the broad shoulders, that it kind of tolerated and allowed the various lifestyles and immigrant groups to coexist fairly well, Al Capone aside. And the city's been ranked with corruption over the years, you know, so the city's had an amazing history. But if you ever get a chance to go to Chicago, go to Chicago. It's a great place to record shop. First of all, a lot of blacks lived in Chicago before they lived anywhere else. And so it means a lot of black music ended up in Chicago, a lot of black vinyls in Chicago. It means the prices are actually lower than they are in most other places because there's a lot of it. They are in New York to drive that price up way beyond. So I'm the Jazz Shepherd, dig Chicago, love your jazz. I'll talk to you soon. Be safe out there. Peace.